Today's video is an update on the lime kiln, kind of what I've been doing, burning it, how much lime I produced, ideas, other things I'm going to use it for, where to go from here, and all that kind of stuff. If you're not familiar with this kiln, it's built out of straw and clay. It's for burning lime, cooking seashells and limestone into something we can use for building and processing food and tanning leather and stuff like that. And really, if you're not familiar with it, you should stop this video here and go to this video here and watch that, because that's a 7-minute long video of building and burning this, and that'll get you up to speed. So for the winter, I just kept this on most of the winter with a few bricks on here, and even in high windstorms that was enough to keep this on. The sides of the kiln got a little bit wet occasionally, but that doesn't really matter because, well, for several reasons. Once the inside is fired a couple of times, it is like fired clay, so that gives it a lot of rigidity even if it were to get wet. And then the other thing is the straw offers the whole thing a lot of rigidity. As you'll see in the other video, or I did see, I was able to build this entire kiln up completely sloppy wet within a couple of hours or less, and it didn't, fall over or slump or anything. So the straw gives it a lot of backbone. It's probably 50% straw. So it doesn't really matter if it gets a little wet. The only thing I really did was I trenched a little bit to keep water from flowing in there, because water was actually flowing and puddling inside at one point. So I burned this 10 times, and as you can see, it's a lot shorter than it used to be. If you watch the first video, or maybe I'll be able to cut in some pictures or footage, it's 8 or 10 inches shorter than it was. If it was 10 inches, 10 burns, it's losing an inch every burn, and that sounds not unreasonable. Now, part of that is because I kept putting, the cover on it, and that would knock some stuff off. It's just prone to damage, when I'm getting in here, look how crumbly that is. Adding wood, adding shells. Cleaning the kiln out, I have to reach all the way into the bottom, so my sleeves are brushing. I think this is kind of where I stand when I'm doing that usually. In fact, it is. So that's from my arm. I lost an extra inch or two here. I'm not sure why that is, but I think it has to do with there just being more oxygen up here at the top. Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's a combination of the abrasion that it undergoes and that there's more oxygen, and so it's burning the top out here and it's burning the straw, and then it starts to fall apart. So maybe possible to protect this by putting something a little harder on the top. I'm thinking of something like cob, basically a clay and sand mix with a lot of sand, but just not so much straw, so that it wouldn't have this all these little holes all shot through it. So maybe that would offer some wear resistance and it wouldn't burn away as fast. So that's one idea to extend the life of this. The other one is just to rebuild it, knock off a bunch of this flaky stuff and then get more straw and clay and spend 10 minutes just, building the thing back up to here. That could really extend the life, because I'm thinking parts of this kiln, this part here, 3 inches thick. Other parts are 4 inches thick. Judging from how thick the walls are down there, with a little more time and care and effort, and maybe a harder rim or rebuilding it, I'm thinking you could possibly push this to, over 15, maybe up to 20 burns. Worth thinking about in terms of the evolution of this particular kiln. I mean, there's obviously other ways to do this too. So between the kiln itself and all the little fragments of shell that didn't burn all the way, this kind of stuff in here, the wood ashes, the bits of charcoal are all really excellent things for my garden, especially since I have acid soils. So the wood ashes and all these little bits of lime are really excellent for that. So I've harvested all of that as I went. I pick out all the big shells, and I'm not really super careful because I want to save, I want stuff to go in the garden anyway, so I don't have to be real careful with my sorting. And I've probably gotten a couple buckets full of stuff, and then I get to use the kiln. I'm not sure how deeply the kiln is fired down here, so what I'll probably do with this kiln is when I eventually take it apart, I'm going to take these chunks and throw them into a charcoal burn where I'm burning charcoal to use as a soil amendment for biochar. So I'll throw these in and finish burning them, so that way all the clay will be completely charred. It's quite a bit of bulk when you add it all up, and if you did this on a regular basis, it would really add up. As you can see, the part on the outside isn't really, fired through all the way. And then take a look at this stuff, because it's just really neat. So you can see the little strings of ash where the grass used to be, and it really leaves this sort of pore structure through the whole thing. So this stuff is really great for the garden, and part of building and firing this kiln, one of the benefits is getting to harvest this, because burnt clay, by all accounts, is excellent for garden soil. You know, it's not like I add this stuff to the soil and I'm like, oh my God, my garden's amazing now that I put in burnt clay. But it does have a very long history of use, and I can't think of a more ideal form than this, because it's already shot through with all these holes and making it like super porous. Those neat pores in there, and I've literally found roots growing through those pores. Plus they offer tunnels for, you know, organisms to hide in, and pretty neat stuff. So I wanted to show you this real quick. This is basically a glass-like slag formed from the kiln wall because the lime lowers the melting temperature of certain minerals. So on this side, it's all melted into this glass-like slag, and on this side, the back side, you can see it's still basically just fired clay, and kind of in between, it's sort of like transitions over to this real just totally melted slag here. So I'm not sure where all this effect is used to advantage in industry, except I know that it's used in smelting metals, because if you have a chunk of ore with, say, iron in it, it also has a bunch of other minerals that you don't want. The lime can lower the melting temperature of those other minerals and allow them to like flow and just like ooze and flow out of the metal, just leaving the metal behind. So I have about a half a barrel of lime putty from this burning this 10 times, so that's about 30 gallons-ish, say. Now that's a lot in terms of using it for like home tanning or processing corn, and that's a huge amount. For building, it's not so much, although it's more than it sounds like because you'd be adding sand. So let's say that 30 gallons is going to be about 4 cubic feet. So if we cut that with 3 parts sand, it's very, very rich. This is like very rich lime putty, very high calcium. So we cut that with 3 parts sand, then we have 120 gallons of finished mortar or plaster, say. So that would cover about 190-ish square feet of a wall at 1 inch thick. So if we could optimize this kiln to end up with about 20 burns out of a kiln this size, then I think you'd be approaching more like 20 burns and 400 square feet of coverage. Kind of interested in what the possibilities are for using this kiln for other stuff like charcoal or pottery and stuff like that. So I have some other ideas too I might play with later, but for now it's like the burn season's over. It's really dry. So in the meantime, this is just going to sit here. But yeah, I'm particularly interested in making charcoal, so I think that's going to be the next use for this. So where to go from here? I kind of feel done with this basic design. I don't really feel the need to maximize it anymore. I'm slightly more motivated to build even quickier versions of this with thinner walls as a way to amend a garden. So like say if you're starting a new garden or your garden needed lime, you could build like a real quickie kiln this size or even smaller, burn it maybe 6 times, and then just smash the whole thing apart and add it to your garden beds. That would actually produce a lot of lime, very high quality lime for a garden. So people used to use burned lime like this for their gardens, and now we use crushed rock. And I think basically what happened is we came up with ways to crush rock, and so that became economically feasible, and we just started doing that. But in the old days, like the best way to pulverize lime was to burn it, and also it's very quick acting, so it's much more chemically active than just ground limestone. So it's very effective. So if you built a small kiln and burned it 6 times, you could actually get a whole lot of lime, and very effective lime, pretty fast. But I think the other 2 areas I'm really interested in with lime are making it as accessible and feasible as possible for people. So using just weird household stuff and just keeping it as simple as possible. The other one is to go the opposite direction, which is just making it, getting a little more sophisticated and try to come up with something I can build that is more efficient, basically, and also more convenient. So that may involve keeping the wood separate from the lime when it's burning. There's something called a Rumford kiln that was invented a long time ago by this guy, Count Rumford. He was some kind of like fire genius, basically. He worked on fire. He designed a fireplace that was, more efficient, less smoky. He designed kilns and all kinds of interesting stuff. Really, really interesting guy. So he designed this lime kiln that has a separate fuel feed, and I'm kind of interested in maybe building a miniature version of one of those. I'm not sure how far you could scale it down, because, you know, the kilns they were building back then were huge. But yeah, I'd like to increase my efficiency and decrease smoke. Those are the two main things. I show in the video loading this from the bottom and just loading it up and then lighting it. But now I've gone entirely with this open system. I've gone entirely starting the fire in the base, building up a bed of coals, and then adding shells and layers of wood from there. And that just makes it a lot less smoky. You don't get that initial like 20 to 30 minutes of heavy smoke coming out. So I pretty much just come to prefer that, and I think I'll do that from here on out with all these type of open burns, unless I can figure out a way to light them from the top. But lighting them from the top so far hasn't worked, because the shells and limestone disrupt the fire from traveling down. And it almost doesn't matter anyway, because once it burns down the first time, you're still going to be adding shells and fuel and layers anyway. And the one last thing I'm still very interested in is producing biochar, charcoal that is, and lime at the same time. So I think that would be a really interesting system. Even if you only produced a little bit of lime for acid soils, I think that could be a big benefit, or you could use the lime for other projects and stuff like that. All right, so that's it. Just a quick update here on the lime kiln.